from PsychSolutions, and today I'm going to be meeting with Colin Simpson, and he's a mental health therapist in the local Edmonton area, and he supports a lot of different clients with mental health concerns, but he also has a personal insight to what bipolar is about, for he has been diagnosed with bipolar himself. And if you haven't heard Colin Simpson present or speak about his bipolar in the past, I think you're going to enjoy this interview. He has a really good way of explaining what life was like for him before he got his diagnosis, how he was trying to manage that with drugs, alcohol, just different strategies that are not usually effective for bipolar, but they might be effective, say, in the immediate moment of distress, as well as what receiving that diagnosis was like for him, and how he's learned to manage his bipolar symptoms along the way and gotten to a place where he's really meeting his potential and living the life that he had wanted, but wasn't able to get there for that 20-some years that he had his diagnosis, or that bipolar was impacting his life, but he didn't know what that was. And so when he joins us here in this room, then we're going to just begin that conversation. And I hope you just glean a lot of insights just from listening to him and him sharing his personal experiences. So now I have Colin Simpson here with me. As I mentioned, he's a mental health professional in the Edmonton area. And just like to give you a moment here just to say hi. And maybe where we'll start is just getting into a bit of who you are, your background, and what you think might be helpful for listeners to know, what you have to share, and kind of what where your insights started to come from anyway.
Thanks so much, Samantha. It's a real pleasure to be here. I really enjoy sharing my story at every opportunity, because as a teenager, a youngster living in rural Alberta, I was a gay teen in rural Alberta, and out there in the 60s, I struggled with my identity, and I struggled with the bipolar that was undiagnosed at the time, with depression, with suicidality at 13 years of age, and that suicidality has spanned across my whole lifetime through 3 psychotic episodes. I bounced around through life from job to job, tried post-secondary 3 times, and was asked to leave once and quit on my own twice. And it was when I was a teenager and I was begging for an interesting life.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, life in rural Alberta is so boring. Please, give me an interesting life. And you know what they say in recovery, addictions recovery, is careful what you wish for, you might get it.
Right.
And that's what I got, an interesting life. So I'd love to have the opportunity to share with people about that, and some of the lessons I've learned, some of them the hard way, and then some of them maybe not so hard, but yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
And that's so, let's maybe start off with kind of where you knew, or you might have not known what it was, but where you knew things were going wrong, or something was up. And then the question that will come after that one is how you became diagnosed with bipolar in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the symptoms were apparent at an early age.
Yeah.
The mania was there. I was sometimes just higher than a kite, and just sometimes hard to be around, over the top, and I knew everything. You couldn't tell me anything. I was sure about everything. And I went through life like that until I was 40, my second psychotic episode. I had a psychotic episode at 25, and it didn't occur to me that anything was wrong. I thought it was the drugs that I was taking at the time, and all I did was quit doing the drugs for a while, and I was fine. Well, what I thought was fine.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until my second psychotic episode at age 40 when my GP finally said to me, you know, have you been struggling with depression? I said, well, I've been feeling a little low. And so he put me on Prozac at the time, which an SSRI did the trick. But the problem there was that sometimes it would throw me into mania as well. So even after I got my initial sort of diagnosis of depression, I was still not sure what was going on. And that was my first clue that something was up. And by that point, I was so grateful to be on a medication, to finally have an explanation for all the strange behavior and the things that I had said to other people, the things that I had said sometimes to hurt people or that hurt myself. I really regretted a lot of that stuff, and was so grateful to learn that I wasn't stuck, that I could be somebody else. And that was one of the things I learned in AA. Was a fellow said to me over coffee one night, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Colin, who are you?" And I said, "I'm me." And he said, "No, who are you as a person?" And I said, "Well, I never really thought about it." And he said, "You could be anybody you wish to be. Look around you at the people in your life. See those great qualities that you see in them. Strength and hope and courage and resilience and a sense of humor and all those wonderful things that you admire in other people. That can be you. You simply have to choose it for yourself and make it so." And I didn't fully comprehend that, but I took it to heart and I started looking around, and that's what I saw. I saw amazing people all around me. And I said to myself, I want to be like this person. I want to be like that person and this person. And I set about, and that was my task, was to become a better person. And am I there? No, work in progress. I'll never be there fully. But I love the fact that I'm on that path, that I'm on that journey.
It's actually interesting because a lot of the clients I work with, I'll say, look at the people that you admire and what is it that you actually admire about them. And often it's things within ourselves that go unrecognized, because if I were to look at the same person, I wouldn't notice those characteristics per se. Something else would stand out for me. So it's usually you recognize what's familiar, but you're not acknowledging or aware it's one of your own personal traits as well, right? So it's interesting just hearing that, how a lot of people have the same ideas, but they share it in different ways, kind of thing, right? So you went out and got more of what you already were wanting, but it was actually already a part of you too.
Yes, and building on strengths is a great way to head down that road, knowing that I'm not starting with nothing. That's a double negative.
We'll allow it.
So it's about heading down that road and knowing that I've already got a bunch of that in me already, and some of that needs to be drawn out, and the rest of it I can learn. Because I'm still teachable. Amazingly. Do
you know what it was specifically that got you to start seeing those things, or the steps that you took that you could even move into the direction of who you were wanting to be?
Well, certainly coming out of the haze of alcohol and drug addiction, being clear-minded, put me in reality with the rest of the world.
Right.
And suddenly then I could see the qualities in people that I never saw before, because I was so self-centered and egotistical and smothered by my addictions that I couldn't see anything but me.
Right. Can you share the story about how you actually ended up with your diagnosis?
Yes, I had my second psychotic episode in 1996. And as I said before, went on to take Prozac for 10 years. And then my third psychotic episode happened when I went off my medication, quit my job, decided, and this is a kind of a mania thing, isn't it? You know, it's somewhat textbook. I'm on Prozac, I've got bipolar, I'm working really hard. Every night I'm on my computer doing emails, I'm remote desktoping to work on the weekend, and all my life, and I burned myself out, essentially. And when I hit that burnout, I hit that wall, I quit my job, quit my medications, and began to decompensate, and I got very sick, started that path down psychosis again, and became suicidal. Friends intervened and did a suicide intervention with me and got me to a psychiatrist the next day. Once I had my psychiatrist, she put me on an antipsychotic along with lithium, and that combination really helped tremendously. And that sort of brought me down to a new normal.
Mm-hmm. What do you know about bipolar now that you didn't know when you first got diagnosed?
Well, see, back in the 60s and 70s when I was a teen and a young man, uh, I had heard about manic depression, and I'd heard
Right.
that people go to hospitals. In
Mm-hmm.
those days, we said people went to Ponoka,
Right.
and which meant the Ponoka Hospital. And I had heard of people that lived in their homes quietly and on their own and didn't really get out much in the community. That were so-called crazy people in my town, and I think that as children we made fun of them, and we thought that it was a sign of weakness. We thought it was a sign of sickness, that it was something that once you got it, that's it, you were stuck for life. That being crazy was something like flicking a switch, and you're either crazy or you're not crazy, and there's no shades of gray, and there's no sliding in and out of states of wellness. So yeah, my knowledge about bipolar was mythological, and when I learned about bipolar, when I started to work at the Schizophrenia Society and learn more about schizophrenia, bipolar, OCD, um, depression, anxiety, when I learned about these illnesses and was working with the families of people and people with lived experience of mental health challenges, I began to see that mental illness or mental health challenges are just like a small part of anybody's life.
Right.
Even people who have the most brittle of illness that's hard to treat still have a kind of quality to their life that's possible. So yeah, and what I know now is that times are changing.
Right.
Our prime minister's mom has bipolar, and she's proud of it. She goes out and she talks,
Right.
and that says, that we're living in a world today that is much different than my teenage world.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is very different.
so cool. Down to a new normal. Which at first was gray and dull and boring, but it was
Yes.
real.
Right.
And yes, I mean, now I must say, psychosis is seductive. Imagine having special powers. Imagine being able to read minds or talk to animals.
Feel great.
And feel like
Yeah.
$1,000,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear it from lots of people, right?
Yeah, it's so seductive. Psychosis and mania are both seductive. And people want to go back there because it feels good.
Absolutely.
You know.
And I don't think everybody understands that piece, right? When you're talking about managing bipolar, you're talking about, if you enjoy spicy food, and you start to eat salt and pepper on your food more, right? It takes a while to understand the nuances and how tasteful that food can be, and have to give up the spicy food that you actually enjoyed, even though it came with cost.
Right.
Maybe upset stomachs at times, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't think everybody understands that it's not just about managing bipolar and getting your life back. It's about losing parts of those your life and the experiences you had that were actually enjoyable or seductive, right? And it's hard to give that up.
So one way that I approached that was to say, well, if I can't have that pleasure, then I'm going to find other pleasures in life.
Okay.
So it was at the, so there were things that I got into my painting, my artwork. I got into journaling and writing, and I found other ways that gave me pleasure, that I could use to replace the loss of psychosis and mania. But the other thing too that was really important was that things like suddenly at the end of the month there's money in my bank account.
Right.
Suddenly I care enough about myself to go out and get decent, healthy food at the grocery store and cook
Yes.
nice meals for myself instead of eating at burgers,
Yeah.
And so there were other things that I started doing for myself that really started to give me pleasure in my
Right.
life, and as I moved forward, I started to find ways to have pleasure in my day.
Is there anything else that kind of came to mind that you sort of replaced mania with, or?
I
Or the wanting of mania, I should say.
I think that I think that I didn't do it consciously. I was just looking to find pleasure in my life in different ways, because
Right.
people had told me that, that I had listened for years to people say things like, I get great pleasure out of going for a walk.
And you're like, I don't get that.
Well, for me, a walk is like I have to get from A to B, so I'll walk. And as briskly as possible, so that I don't have to endure
it's a task
it that
to get
long.
done.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, just do it. So yeah, it was about finding pleasure in the little things, and I guess I've been so fortunate in my life that I haven't had what I would call real tragedy happen to me in a huge way. At least I don't look at it that way.
Right.
That overcoming some of the things or the issues that I've dealt with over the years was not insurmountable for me. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's maybe some experiences you had didn't feel like they were completely overwhelming you to overcome. It was more about you accepting you and coming to terms with who you were, and then allowing that to grow. More so, not that you didn't struggle.
And knowing that we all struggle.
Right.
We all have our things to deal with in life.
Yeah.
Nobody gets a pass. Nobody gets a perfect life.
Yeah.
Because that's...
But it feels like it when you're struggling. It feels like...
At the time?
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
But just remind yourself, nobody gets a pass. We all struggle. Yeah.
We all struggle.
When we're talking about managing bipolar, what were some of what does your self-care plan look like? And what you kind of put into a daily or weekly basis?
I try to be holistic in my wellness. So I try to think along those sort of 7 dimensions of the wellness wheel. Emotional, spiritual, financial, recreational. I try to make sure that I do things. I have a certain routine, and I've become a little OCD about things.
I'm a little creatures obsessed. Of habit.
Yeah.
We actually thrive when we get a routine going.
I love structure, but I love to play too.
Right.
So make sure I'm in bed on time. There's a window there, somewhere between 9 and 9:30 when I have to get to bed, because I want to be up around 5:30.
Right.
So I want to be up early. I've got to have 7-8 hours sleep. That's my optimum window. Too much and I'm groggy, not enough and I'm jittery. I've got to have that sweet spot, the Goldilocks sleep. I got to make sure that I have something nice for breakfast.
Okay.
A good lunch and a good dinner. I've increased my fruits and vegetables in my diet and cut back on the amount of meat and fat that I consume. Try to ease off on the salt, because that's a real tough one.
That's a hard one to ease off.
I write in my blog every day. Every day I come home and I write a little bit in my blog. The food and the sleep. I walk home from work every day. It's a mile. It's a great walk. Brisk walk down Jasper Avenue, and I love this, seeing the faces as I walk down the street.
You're still walking quickly.
I have this terminal smile on my face, right? And everybody smiles at me on Jasper Avenue, and I smile back, and I have a lovely walk home. I love smiling at strangers, and they smile back at me. And I try to keep my smoking down to a minimum, but that's really hard to do. I'm struggling with the smoking.
Yeah.
And every so often, I have friends over, and we'll have a nice visit. And and of course, and my blogging is really important to me. Yeah. Even little things like taking time to pause and reflect in the morning, and I like to take and do, I guess you'd call it a meditation, but I just pause with my eyes shut and just relax and think about how I'm feeling, what my body feels like this morning, what my mind feels like, what is coming up today that might cause me to feel a little tense or anxious, and that kind of a thing. And if I know that I'm feeling anxious, how am I going to deal with that? You know,
Right.
what sort of strategies will I use to address that anxiety?
And this is like 1 or 2 minutes. You're not talking like
Just
a
a couple of
long-
minutes.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
find a lot of people when they start this type of practice, it's hard to find the time to carve out, but it's also hard to actually stay with that for that long. So I always talk about 1 minute meditations or
Oh, yeah.
just one breath where you just check in with where you're at, right?
Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
very short and easy to get going on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that you found helpful was just slowing down and saying, okay, and where am I at now, and enjoying whatever was happening that particular moment or day.
Yes, yes.
Something that else comes to mind when you're talking about bringing in more enjoyment to the life is if you slow down and take that breath, bring in all 5 senses.
Mm.
What is it you're
Mhm.
hearing right now? What are
Mhm.
you feeling? What are you seeing? What can you touch? And then if there's taste there too, right? You can slow down the moments that we actually taste the coffee that we're drinking.
Right.
And simple
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
this,
yeah.
right? People who are struggling with bipolar will talk about how they're not able to find that change within their own workplace still.
Mm.
And I wonder if you can maybe share some of your experiences with work or for the clients, people that you've guided along the way and what their experiences are about trying to figure out bipolar and the workplace and whether to disclose or not disclose or just any sort of insights around that area.
I think that we still live in a world of stigma.
Right.
We can get excited about people who, champions who come out and speak about various mental illnesses, and that's part of social change. But the world that we're leaving behind, and we're still connected with it, is a world that's very judgmental.
Right.
And I would caution anyone who is thinking about coming out about their bipolar or their mental health challenge in a workplace to be careful, to be mindful of who you're talking to. You don't want to be passed over for promotions. Of course, we don't want to live with dark secrets all our lives, but there are just some things that it's not important to say at work at this point in time. Just like most of us don't talk about sex, politics, and religion at work.
Right.
So put mental health challenges in that arena and say, you know what, this is my personal stuff, and if it doesn't impact on how my work goes, then why is it even important for me to talk about it at work? Because work is not really the place where we go to be social activists.
Right.
We tend to do that outside of work. And people can, now that said, oftentimes, anytime I've told somebody I have bipolar, they turn around and say, oh, my uncle, oh, my brother, oh, my mom. And I find out everybody's got mental illness, you know.
Right.
Well, not everybody, of course, but everybody's affected or impacted or
Right.
touched by mental illness
Yeah.
at some point in their lives.
And what about for the people that are finding that it is impacting their work? So they're taking a lot of time off work and they're not really at the place where they're managing their symptoms enough to keep it on the low while they need to. What would be some of the things that people, if you have found that they've been able to work in that when that's happening?
I think it's very important for people to understand that living or coping with a mental illness is complex on a good day.
Right.
So in the workplace, find your strength, find your inner strength to reach out for the help that's available. So in my workplace, we have an employee assistance program.
Right.
And that's all paid for through our benefits package. And so I can get free counseling by simply accessing my employee assistance program.
Yeah.
But you can go to organizations like Momentum,
Yep.
where you are,
Yep.
and get free single session counseling. There are various other organizations, Canadian Mental Health Association, the
Yeah.
Family Center, John Howard Society. Various organizations are offering counseling out there. The City of Edmonton offers counseling.
Yep.
Lots of places where you can go. And if you're not sure about that, faith communities.
Right.
There are often very compassionate, kind, considerate people who are involved in, churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, places in faith communities. If you're a young person, there's always a school counselor to talk to. But of course, we're talking about work. But have the courage, have the strength, find that strength within yourself to ask for help. It was something I didn't do for so long in my life, and if I don't have a lot of regrets, but there's one thing I do regret, and that's I didn't ask for help sooner. And maybe I wasn't meant to. Maybe I was meant to go through these experiences so that I'm here today, who I am today, because I'm happy with who I am today. And am I fixed or done? No, not at all. No, and I'm excited because there's so much to do. That is the cool part, and not enough time.
I think it probably is a lot to do with where your comfort level is and how you're able to advocate and voice out for yourself too. And if you're under threat to possibly losing a job, so there'd be different factors that you would have to weigh in with that decision, right? I don't think there is a right or wrong answer with it. It's just a matter of where you're at, where you work, but really where your comfort level is overall. Managing work, because what you talked about earlier, you're interested in your work, right?
Yes.
So how do you manage that? Because I know a lot of people struggle with putting work down or not staying too long, and it might be whether they are enjoying their work or whether they're not, right? But just that kind of balancing that out to prevent the burnout, right?
Work-life balance is critical. One of the reasons I went into my second psychotic episode was that I discovered remote desktop, and oh my gosh, I can do emails from home, and I can work on the grant application on the weekend, and I just drove myself into the ground with overdoing it, and so the lesson there for me was work-life balance.
So you don't have remote access anymore.
So I don't have remote access. I don't even want to know. And I'm not one of those take your phone out and check your emails while you're sitting at home. I have never looked at my emails at home once, because as far as I'm concerned, once I'm off the clock, I'm off the clock.
Yep.
Now it's my time.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share my time in exchange for money, but at the end of the day, that time is my time, and no amount of anything would get me to change that, because I've come to that place in my life where my wellness is so important to me that I would go to the ends of the earth to maintain it.
And I actually makes me think of what you said before in another presentation that you had with one of my groups, is I got sick of being sick. Literally, right?
Yes,
and I guess that ties into why you got to a place where you're willing to let go of having mania.
Right.
Even how seductive it can be, and how great it felt at times, because the agitation can come with it, and then when you start to dip down after, but just getting sick of being sick and wanting to be the best me. Yeah.
June 19th, 1990.
Okay.
I wake up and I've got a splitting headache. My head is just pounding.
Yeah.
And I look over and there's a stranger in the bed. I have no idea who this fellow is. Not a clue.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have a death wish.
Right.
Because it was the era of the early days of AIDS. And I stood up and went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror, and I said to myself, I am sick of being sick. This has to stop. And I quit cold turkey. Alcohol, drugs, street drugs. I quit everything. I was sober, clean and became clean and sober. Joined AA. Well, first I went to Al-Anon because I was sure that the problem was my parents. So I was going to get them fixed up.
Yeah.
But then I was only there for a couple of months, and I went, oh my gosh, no, I need to go to AA.
Yeah.
So I went to group, and there was a gay and lesbian group that I went to, and met some lovely people, and got some really good stuff to work with, good tools for living. Had the opportunity to put my addictions sort of in their place, in context, take a look at the reasons why I was using, because I mean, one of the things that I recently came to realize was I drank heavily partly because I was manic during the day. I needed to come down.
Right.
I needed to come down and relax. I was so go all day long.
Right.
I had there was nothing left in the tank. So toss back some beers, get some calories into me, you get that sugar rush, and then get that alcohol rush and the glow, and then you get to make jokes and be a funny guy. But it was part of drinking was to escape the mania. Even though I loved the mania, I needed to come down.
Last so long.
Yeah.
So I guess even remembering that it might feel good, but you get tired of being at that high too, right? You need to come down eventually.
Well, and people tend to be a bit turned off by mania. They tend to. It's sort of like go. No,
it feels good, but has all this cost.
Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. And so people can only take so much of a manic energy. Person and that kind of energy. And so and they give you clues like, excuse me, I have to go now, and things like that. But they give you clues like you're over the top. And so I got those clues from people. I knew that I was a bit insufferable, but I thought it was because I wasn't trying hard enough.
Okay.
I had no idea. It did not occur to me that this might be bipolar or mania. I thought I wasn't trying hard enough, and that if I just tried harder, things would work out. And the harder I tried, the less likely they were to work out. So I was in this catch-22 kind of loop inside myself that, I would get up each day and say, I'm going to try harder today. And I would try harder and it would just be a failure, So it was just, I was in this loop.
And that's where the crash and burn came. So when you started putting that plan into place, my guess is you had to know sort of what your symptoms were, some of the behaviors that were tripping you up and getting you into trouble, right? And I have found that a lot of people, when they start to self-reflect or try to kind of track what's going on for them, they have a hard time identifying even what that is, right? And so I guess my question is, what did you do so that you were able to begin pinpointing some of the things, or what were some of the things you noticed, so that you could use them as clues as to things were starting to go off again?
Journaling was very important to me
For you,
in the early days of alcohol and drug recovery. Journaling was very important because what I would do was free flow,
just whatever came.
Stream of consciousness. And as I was doing stream of consciousness, I imagined it to be something like opening up drawers inside my head. And then as I looked in the drawers, I would find things, and then I would pull the drawer right out and see there's another drawer behind it. And then I would find other things behind those things. So I found that I had layers of experiential, well, it wasn't all pain, but layers of stuff that I had to get through in order to really come to certain aha moments. And oftentimes I would hit those aha moments and I would start crying. At one point I remember writing about being bullied as a gay teen in rural Alberta. And I was writing about that experience, and as I wrote, I started to realize that my bullies were probably bullied themselves. Because we were in a small town and everybody knew everybody, and I knew their families. I knew what was going on. And and it was like the domino effect. As I realized I was bullied by them, they were bullied by other bullies, which meant I was part of something that was cyclical. That was abusive and violent and cyclical. And I cried for them, and I forgave my bullies. On paper, I wrote that. I forgive you.
Now understand
and
the
I
context,
feel for your pain too. I feel for all our pain. And as I did that, I acquired such a lightness, a sense of relief, of being able to just let go of that big bag of crap that I'd been carrying around all those years, around that whole bullying and suicidality piece, and it was a letting go. I look in the mirror, Samantha, and I'm 59 years old, and I'm looking for wrinkles. I'm going like, when I sobered up, when I got clean and sober, my face relaxed.
Oh, okay.
And I started going around with this pleasant look on my face, and people started to see the real me.
Right.
Because I
that
was
even
no
you didn't
longer
know.
pushing this painful me out to people.
Yeah.
And now I look in the mirror and I think, wow, I'm 59. I should have more wrinkles.
Yeah, you should.
What is this? And it's because I've let go.
Right.
And let life happen. And when I embrace what comes at me each day as an adventure, as another wonderful journey, not to be trite, but when I embrace what's coming without anticipation, without expectation, but simply with the open-mindedness of accepting that whatever comes is what's supposed to be, my job is to be there in the moment and experience it.
Right.
And
so it's just you kind of purposely making that a habit to dip back into that, what's happening now, and having those little mindful moments too.
Yeah, that well of mindfulness.
Yeah, and you make that a daily habit because you do that in the mornings.
It's part of. I'll lean back in my chair at work,
and even
stretch my arms out, look up at the roof, and just pause for a few moments and breathe.
Yeah.
Just feel my breath.
It's the most simple tool, but because everything that works has a bit of a cliche thing to it.
Yeah.
But it becomes a cliche when there's that ounce of truth to it, right?
Yes,
and the things that are most simple to do, like going to the breath, does not mean it's easy. And most of us don't practice it enough or think it's worthwhile or anything, right?
Well, it's a skill, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And
we choose the skills we
schedule
use.
it in. Make sure it happens.
Put that in my phone, yeah.
And some people do that, right?
Sure.
Just little alarms that go off.
Yeah.
Take that one breath, right? Because it really impacts the hormonal levels as well, specifically cortisol, the stress hormone. When you started paying attention, I'm guessing it wasn't just what you were noticing, but did you elicit what other people noticed? Or because sometimes there's this block that we have within our own behavior, right? And I found that even for myself, I'm not aware of some of the things I do, like when I'm stressed, right? But other people pick it up and they're able to give, so it was quicker for me to pick up things when I asked others, right? And I'm wondering if you use that as part of your collection of self-data.
Good question. People that I may have
considered supportive
reached out to for support. I have to preface this statement by saying that my father was a severe alcoholic at his death. When I was a teenager, I saw him start to slip away.
Yeah.
And I talked about it with my mother. I talked about it with my siblings. We talked as a family. Yeah. We persuaded him to go to rehab 4 times, and it didn't take for him, which I feel badly for him that he didn't have the opportunity to experience sobriety, but it was his walk, it was his life, and he did it his way.
Right.
And I may not have liked that, but I have to respect his choices. Right. So when I reached out to my family for support, in a large part it wasn't there, because they really didn't know what to say or do.
Right.
And I know that my mom, it probably brought up all sorts of feelings and emotions for her around her relationship with her husband. So I didn't find that there was a lot of support within my family. One of the great supports was the peer support that I received in AA. I found that people who were heavy into the booze and the drugs, who I still associated with, would make comments to me about my something doesn't stink anymore now that I'm all clean and sober. And I think
Right.
there are people who are having issues or know that they have a drinking issue, resent the idea that other people might get sober and that maybe they can't, or they choose
Right.
not to. So there was some resistance, there was some friction there with other people who were using, who
Yeah.
didn't appreciate the fact that I wasn't using. So disclosing sobriety wasn't always a safe thing for me. So there was times when I just wouldn't tell people
Right.
because I didn't want to be judged again harshly for a choice that I'd made for myself. But you know, my doctor supported me all the way.
Yeah. And so your doctor
And-
might have been one of the main people that could pick up clues and like, this is what I see. And,
Mhm.
right.
Mhm. Yeah.
So for you, it was more you were able to pick it up on your own, or because you really went into self-reflection,
Mhm.
and your family wasn't able to provide that feedback because of just their own life getting in the
That's
way.
where they were at.
Yeah, and the doctor. So how did you build a support kind of system around yourself then? Because we don't all have families or even close friends at the moment that we can get the support from. So it's about reaching beyond that and building it elsewhere, right?
That's a really good question, because I've always been a very social person who was a loner on the side. I don't know if that makes sense. It doesn't sound, the words come out of my mouth, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but I'm certainly not a private person. I've always shared
So you socialize easy, but
everything.
you enjoy your time alone as well.
But there was always an inner self that
Right.
was always very private.
Yeah.
And I wasn't raised in a family that shared their emotions
Yeah.
or feelings about things. We were a family of doers, not a family of feelers.
Mm-hmm.
And not that you can't be both,
Yep.
but it's just that that's who we
Who
were.
it was.
And that may have had as much to do with the culture of the 50s and 60s and 70s that I came out of
Yeah.
as it was my specific family. I mean, I think that a lot of families were very similar to mine.
Right.
So I had to find a well of strength within myself. I was working at the Schizophrenia Society at the time, and I found much support and strength there from family members of people struggling with mental health challenges and addictions. So I found a lot of support there. And then a couple of good friends. And I don't need a lot of friends. I have like 2 good friends, and they're great.
I guess the next question then would be, how did you actually go about like involving like your 2 friends and as really your support people and some of your coworkers, but what specifically are some of the things that you've done to include them or how you've coached them? And the reason I'm asking this question is a lot of the people I work with they draw blanks as to how to even begin that, right? And they say that oftentimes we get the support we're not actually needing,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of conversations around identifying what it is you're needing and then coaching and letting other people know exactly what they can do. So I'm wondering how you've specifically done that in your life and what that sounds like or looks like.
Right. So I use the how approach.
Okay.
Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness.
Okay.
So I am with my friends
Yeah.
and my doctor.
Yeah.
They hear everything, and they get the truth. And
Yeah.
I tell them exactly how I'm feeling, exactly what's going on, because I need them as a reality check. Because I live alone, I don't have a partner, I don't have children, I don't have people that I can go to in the house
Yeah,
that
see
will
the daily
support
ups
me.
and downs, yeah.
So there's got to be people, and I'm not going to do this with my coworkers at work.
Right.
So where do I find it? I find it in my friendships and with my doctor.
Yeah.
And it's about being brutally honest with them. And it's really interesting because what I've discovered is that what I think is going on in my head, once I speak it, A, it sounds different right off the bat as soon as I
Yeah.
speak it. B, as soon as it's out there, it starts to look different, and I start seeing it different, and in conversation with my friends and my doctor and the people in my life, we start to have this dialogue that's a very honest and open dialogue, and that gets very real. So, and I don't lie about anything, you know.
Yeah.
If I've overdone something, I just come right out and say it.
So if you're wondering
And,
about an interaction that happened with one of them or with another person, you might share with them what you're
Absolutely.
worried about, right?
Yes.
So that's the how approach. What does that stand for again?
Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness.
Okay. And are they, as your support system, aware of this approach, or is it just something you practice?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
They're-
there's an agreement already.
They already
Yeah.
know that they're going to get
Okay.
the honest truth from me.
Yeah.
And I have also thanked them for just being there for me, for listening to sometimes very mundane things. Like, I'm trying to get this report done on time, and I can't believe she said this, and then he said that, and how am I supposed to do my report when this is going on, and I'm on deadline here? And, you know, it could be something really simple like that.
Yeah.
That
they're just
feels like a
emailed.
mountain
Yeah.
to me, and that I'll never get over this. It turns out to be a molehill as soon as I start talking with other people about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what that sounds like to me is that they're not going into the problem with you and like, yeah, they said this, and right? It's just a matter
They're
of reflecting
observers.
back.
Yeah. They're observing. Morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is there anything specific that you like to hear from them, like phrases or words, or is it more what they're doing with their behaviors per se, or?
Both of my friends are very intelligent and will have conversations about, you know, what happens when two black holes get together, or, you know, what is gravity, you know, and you know, we'll have deep conversations about, or analytical conversations where our brains are challenged. But no, they don't have to say anything. The fact that they show up is enough for me. The fact they're still my friends. They care enough to phone and come over.
Yeah.
That's all. And, you know, every once in a while they'll invite me out to something social. I don't really like to do a lot of social stuff anymore anyway. So, you know, once a year I go to Thanksgiving dinner.
Not twice, just once.
Just once.
And what about, so these are the friends that you've had for a little bit. What about new people you meet, and just that whole idea of disclosing, not just necessarily in the workplace, but just disclosing bipolar in general? I mean, obviously you're open about it because you're public, you give presentations and such, but you took your time to get to that place, right? So I'm just wondering how you approach that, or if you disclose everywhere you go, or just your thoughts on that.
Pretty much. I fancy myself a bit of a social activist. I like to imagine that I am. So I put it out there at every opportunity. I'm not in people's face as much as I refuse to let stigma silence me. So when the moment presents itself, I won't back off. I will come right out and say, well, I have bipolar. I live with bipolar. I live with a mental health challenge, depending on who I'm talking to. I have no qualms about saying I'm a gay man. I'm a gay senior, and gay urban senior, living with bipolar. I believe strongly in social justice, and have many things to say about many things. And feel quite confident in doing that. I haven't always been that way.
And that's what I was going to ask. What was the early stages for you when you weren't necessarily confident with it, right? How you maneuvered through that time period?
I wouldn't even, no, I don't think I've told my landlord I have bipolar. There you go. Yeah.
Just an
because
oversight.
it's not relevant. It's not.
Right.
It's not relevant to the conversation. You know?
It's not about secret keeping too, or disclosure per se, but it's also knowing when to use discretion. Right. That it doesn't mean you have to always tell everybody everything.
Right.
But if it doesn't matter, it's not relevant. Then what's the point?
And discretion is Discretion is the high road
Right.
of social order.
Yeah.
It's the place where we go where A, we respect ourselves, B,
Yeah.
respect each other, and C, we respect this place. If that's the theme of my blog, actually, is love.
Okay.
Because I believe only love will get us through.
Mm-hmm.
And love starts with love of self, each other, and this place.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things in addictions recovery that I had to learn how to do was to love myself enough, to
tough.
care enough to treat myself well. I read, one old timer told me in the program once that the highest form of wisdom is kindness. And when you layer that idea on top of a life such as mine, the most important lesson I had to learn in life was to be kind to myself.
Yeah.
Because once I started being kind to myself, it all just falls into place.
Right.
Love of each other and this place just follows suit. You don't even have to do it. It just
Yeah.
happens. So self-love, to me, is the
Yeah.
most important thing that we can teach children or that we can learn as adults.
Yeah. And in some ways it's learning how to be kind to yourself in spite of or through managing bipolar is a harder challenge, and therefore it's much more rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to be kind to yourself when there's nothing going on.
Right.
But
Right.
is that
Right.
truly self-kindness,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's when you can maintain it in spite of the difficulties you're finding yourself in, right?
Yeah.
And then that's a true strength.
And,
Right.
you know, we were talking before about, pausing during the day and just taking a moment to breathe. That's
Yeah.
an act of self-love.
Right.
Now, I do it consciously. I say to myself,
take care of myself. Yeah.
man, I love you. And do that.
Yeah.
Not in some sort of phony, artificial way, but
No.
in a very authentic, genuinely way,
Yeah.
say to myself, man, you deserve to be loved. So,
Yeah.
and what happened to me in my recovery, in my early days of addictions recovery, was a couple of years in, as I started to grow as a person. One morning I walked into the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and I looked up at myself. I looked myself right in the eye and said, oh my God, you're not bad looking.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my life that
You
I
could ever
ever
say it.
felt attractive.
Yeah.
That I looked in the mirror and the guy I saw was a handsome man.
Yeah.
And I had never seen that before. And that was one of the most lovely, it was
Those
the most
moments, yeah.
delightful moments I've ever had in my whole life. It was
Yeah.
just that moment where I finally realized I might love me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a really nice journey for me as a therapist to see people reach that moment.
Yes, I'll
'Cause a
bet.
lot of people struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I find people will find it a little bit easier when they soften it to, it's possible I can learn to love myself. It's possible I can treat myself with love. It's possible that I can do little things as though I like myself.
Right.
And then work up to, I think I like myself. And there's nothing wrong with it.
No, and it's not about ego.
No,
There's
it's
nothing
not
to do with
nothing
ego.
about that.
No, it's about love, yeah.
Yeah, because and then people say, wasn't that selfish to do things for yourself? I'm like, no, you can actually do, self-care allows you to care for others more.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So it's actually the
Exactly.
least selfish act.
Yeah.
Selfish act.
It
Yeah.
is. It is precisely that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It is not selfish at all.
Not in the slightest, but it's for some reason we get that perception it is,
Yeah,
or it feels
yeah.
like it, right?
Well, it's that martyr syndrome
Yeah.
thing that's been
Yeah, going
traveling
on.
around through the human
But
experience.
if you're
for-
hungry and you're tired, you eat a meal and get your sleep. You're a much better friend. So you're actually taking care of your friends by taking care of yourself, right? Knowing that some of our listeners are support people themselves,
Yes.
as opposed to people who have bipolar, what do you think is important for them in their role as support people to really be aware of, or to know that you think would be important for them to kind of take home from watching watching our conversation.
I had a great experience with the Schizophrenia Society. For 12 years I was with them. And one of the things that E. Fuller Torrey is a leading expert on schizophrenia, had said at a conference that I attended in Saskatoon, and then later in his book Surviving Schizophrenia, I read it again, and he said, your needs come first. Yeah. In order for you to take care of your son or daughter, your family member with a mental illness, you need to be in great shape, because this is going to be quite a load, and you're going to need all the strength and the courage that you've got and all the skills you can muster, and maybe learn some new ones as well.
Yeah.
The other thing he said was, let go of the shame and the blame. People,
that's hard for people to do.
People are ashamed to
Yeah.
have somebody in the family with a mental illness. Parents are ashamed to have a son or daughter with schizophrenia, bipolar, OCD, depression, suicidality. They're ashamed of that. And then oftentimes parents, and I don't know this from personal experience, but oftentimes parents will blame themselves.
Right.
Or other family members will blame the parents.
Right, yeah.
So siblings will say, oh, why are you giving him all the love? How come he gets all the attention? You don't love me anymore. You love him more than you love me, and he's behaving like a jerk. And so there's a dynamic that's going on there that's really hard on the family. And families can break up over a diagnosis, over psychosis.
Yeah.
Families can break up over addictions quite easily. So but the path is clear.
Yeah.
And the path is let go of the shame and blame, and you need to take care of yourself first. You come first, then everybody else second.
Right. Ties right into what we were just speaking about self-love, right?
Self-love, yeah.
And that if you take care of yourself, you can take care of others more. And I guess that's where that discretion, disclosure thing comes in. Because if you get comfortable with it, you educate yourself around it, you understand it, then it's a whole lot easier to speak to it. And correct misperceptions, right? If people are asking questions or they say something that seems ignorant, something that I talk a lot about with the people I work with is try to see that as an opportunity to educate. I mean, if it's coming out downright mean, then you might just decide to leave the situation based on where your skill set is. But instead of seeing it as just a pure insult, it might be at least they're interested, or maybe start to share some information around it. And be able to provide whatever it is that you understand, right?
Sure.
Because it's coming from mostly ignorance or what they've been taught incorrectly.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But it's hard. You got to get to your comfort level to be able to be in that place.
It truly, and that's where again we talked before about reaching out for help. You know, people don't have to do this alone. That's if there's one message that's so vital, it's you do not have to do this alone. You are not alone.
Yeah. Support people, as I was saying, is you might actually not necessarily have to be one of the key people that manage the bipolar symptoms, but you're the outlet, right? So you can do the movies, you can do the golfing, whatever it is, but you're not really part of the bipolar. So you might be the person who gives them a break from bipolar, because we don't want life being bipolar. And then if you have bipolar, you might actually choose that you keep certain people in those roles, that they're not really part of the bipolar management, but they're about the wellness, the whole life balance. So there's life outside of it, right? Conversations that don't involve bipolar all the time. And that's about building that support system too. Kind of thing. And just thinking about support people in general as well, and trying to share some of that information with listeners who find themselves in that role. What are some of the common trappings or things that they can get muddled up in, or attempts? Yeah, the pitfalls that they tend to happen for support people.
So it's important to acknowledge from the start of this conversation that none of us gets, most of us don't get much of an education on bipolar.
Right.
They don't teach it in school. We don't talk about it around the dinner table. You don't see it on TV. So there's this vacuum, right? This
Yeah.
absence of knowledge and understanding. There's lots of compassion, lots of people care, but
They don't understand.
your gut caring has to happen in a way that's useful and productive and worthwhile, and not just spinning tires. So there's a couple of things to avoid, and one is shame and blame. And it's a place where families often go, where people are ashamed of having somebody with bipolar in the family, and then and people will be blamed. Oftentimes parents will blame themselves, or family members will blame the parents. Some of the siblings are saying, how come so and so gets all the love? You're directing all your attention to them, and you're ignoring us. And this has been going on for 2 years now, and it's not fair. I need love too. And so, knowledge, I think, is the pivotal key. So we got to get that knowledge somewhere. You can read books. You can go to support groups. Support groups are a great place for people to get that kind of knowledge to help them strategize how to deal with various situations, and to make sure that they don't burn out. To make sure that caregivers and support people don't feel like, this is too much, I can't do this anymore, because that's not where we want to go. What we want to do is to feel lifted up by our efforts to help, by our desire to express and show our love for the people that we're caring for.
And sometimes when you're in groups, you're able to see somebody else talking, and also you recognize yourself in it, and you're like, that's where I got lost in this, right?
Yes,
And a bit of that mirror holding
yes,
back, right? And
yes.
not feeling like you're on your own with it, right?
Yes, that's right.
And
that's so important, actually.
It
it's
is.
not feeling like we're alone.
Yeah.
Feeling like we're not doing this by ourselves. And we're not the only ones.
Because it feels like that, right?
Oh, it does.
The other thing I think support people can play in is being able to point out what they're seeing, right? And oftentimes it's easy to pick out the big things. This is what I call body talking. When you're spending all the cash, you're acting in ways that you don't when you're feeling more like you. But where you can really intervene is when you start to intervene in those really small, there's those subtle clues that I call body whispers. That's the time that you can intervene before you're already way over here, whether it's mania, hypomania, or depression, right? I wonder if you could just speak to a little bit about those body whispers, or the clues, the warning signs and things.
Warning signs are so vital, so important, because having a bout of mental illness is not like flicking a switch off and on.
Right.
It doesn't happen sane, insane. It doesn't happen like that at all, and we often slide into stuff slowly and gradually. We could feel stuff coming over many, many years now of dealing with suicidality. What I've learned about myself is when I start having those thoughts, those escape thoughts, like, oh gee, I'll move to Vancouver, there's no snow there, or it's time for a new job, even though my job's going well, I'm doing very well in my job, maybe it's time for a new job. And when I start having those sort of thoughts, I have to check myself and have a little conversation and see if I am starting to have those escape thoughts. Because the next thoughts after that are, oh, well, you know what, I should just pack it in. I'm 59, I've had a good life. Why carry on? Oh, what the heck, Or worse yet, and those are starting to be danger thoughts. And then when I get into that area where I'm now floridly suicidal, where I'm thinking, you know what, I think I'm just going to jump right out the window. Then I need to get help immediately. Not wait till tomorrow, not, call somebody, call the ambulance, call 911, get to emergency, call my psychiatrist, call my friends, whatever, get help immediately. So it's those body whispers, those early thoughts that can save me all the grief and aggravation of going down that road again, because I have been down that road so many times that it's actually, well, it's not boring, but it's
called it a comfy shoe,
well-worn, yes. It's like a pair of comfortable old shoes, yes. And the problem with a pair of comfortable old shoes, they feel so good on your feet, but they stink.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. But you just fall back into using it again, right? Like
it's just
because you know it, it's a habit, it's a pattern.
Force a habit, yeah.
And this is where it's like why I think tracking stuff, and I do believe in writing it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're going into either of these moods, whether it's depression or mania, because bipolar is not just depression or mania or hypomania. There's also the paranoia, there's the agitation, anger, there's the OCD kind of tendencies that can come with it, the inability to pay attention, or ADHD. So there's a lot of things that come with bipolar too, right? But when we find that we're going into one of those different states or ways of being, we often forget what our own clues are, our own symptoms, right? So having it written down, go, wow, I'm hitting 5 out of 10 of these. It's probably a good sign that I might be going back into depression or mania, right? And so we just kind of overlook it at times, right? No, I'm just feeling good. Right? But, okay, I got 5 out of 10. Maybe I need to put some things in place now before it's at a place where those interventions are not going to work anymore because they require more extreme ones. Kind of thing,
absolutely. And that's, and again, it comes back down to that, what we were talking about before, about how we're all different.
Yeah.
And you could say bipolar is this.
Yeah.
But I only get this part over here, and somebody else gets this part over here, and others get stuff that intersects. So, it's all the more important then to have as much knowledge and understanding as possible about bipolar.
Yeah.
So you've got to arm yourself with knowledge if you're going to be able to live successfully with bipolar. And I think that's something that we don't really think about with mental illness a lot, and that is the whole idea of living successfully with a mental illness. Because I hold down a job. I have a good job. I earn a middle-class income. I have a stable life. I live very well. I live better than probably people have ever lived in the history of humanity, with health and education and infrastructure and everything that we have. I live a fabulous life. Now, 100 years ago, or even maybe 50 years ago, I'd be twiddling my thumbs in a mental institute in some psych ward somewhere.
Lack of understanding.
Because people would have put me there to keep me safe. Because they didn't have the treatments, they didn't have the understanding, they didn't have the knowledge to deal with bipolar the way we do today. So I'm so hopeful. Like it's really exciting where we're going with bipolar these days.
No, it is neat because a lot of people would have been placed to the side, just not knowing what to do with it, right?
And so many would have died, Samantha. So many would have died prematurely, either from addictions or at their own hand, from suicide, accidents, or people would have killed them.
Yeah. When you're in suicidal ideation and that, what are some of the things that have helped pull you out of that? So kind of speaking to both the people who are experiencing suicidal ideation themselves, but also the support people. But what are some of the to-dos and not-dos that have worked for you? Because you can't speak to everybody, but just from your own personal experience that have really worked.
Suicidal ideation, or the business of having thoughts about suicide or killing myself, is something that I deal with on the front end with vigorous self-talk. And I think
doesn't surprise me.
Vigorous is the important word here.
Yeah.
I talk to myself. And even sometimes, I'll go to, if I'm in a meeting and I'm having thoughts, I might get up and just go to the bathroom and just have a little conversation with myself and say, stop this. What is going on here? Is there some stressors that are happening in my life right now that are causing me to feel this need to want to escape? What's going on? And usually there is. Usually I can draw a trail back, a little trail of breadcrumbs back to the source, or source is, because oftentimes it's not just one source. It's I forgot to pay the rent today. Oh my gosh, I'm on deadline with them at my job, and so it'll be multiple factors that come to play, and part of that comes with experience, but part of that is just being able to recognize that self-talk is a useful tool. So oftentimes I'll just have this I will use my inner voice and just say, stop it.
But this is different than the inner critic, right?
Well, but yeah, and I like the inner voice more than the inner critic anyway, because the inner critic's always critical. But the inner voice is I'm in control
Yeah.
of the inner voice. And I say, and oftentimes I just say, stop, please stop it.
Yeah. And it's something I've done with clients along the way too, especially when they're working with kids or teens, is to speak what's what we're calling now the inner voice out loud. Oh, you know what? I'm actually not looking so bad today. I kind of enjoy this, or I think I really did that job well, or I did this thing, but so that they can overhear themselves talking positively about them themselves. So they develop their child will naturally start to bring in more of an inner voice and not just the inner critic. Right?
Oh, I see.
So that's a strategy that I would do with
Yes.
parents. But if just regards pulling this back into our conversation, is one thing that listeners might be able to start doing is how could I develop my inner voice, and what would I be saying? What would I say to somebody else that I cared deeply for, and then start to use that as developing their own inner voice, so that they not always or only listening to their inner critic. Right.
The developing inner voice was something that I became attracted to, well, first because I had read about cognitive behavioral therapy, but also because I came to a realization that when I say something out loud, it immediately becomes different.
Right, you're saying that, yeah.
It changes. So hearing myself say, I've been feeling suicidal, or I've been feeling...
Different perspective.
I've been feeling quite manic today, oh my gosh. Suddenly, getting it out of my head, even if it's just me that's hearing it, it makes a difference.
It's
It actually
it
changes the perspective or the color of it.
Yeah.
And then, once I've got a different perspective on it, saying it to somebody else. So I've been feeling really manic today. I might say that at work to a coworker. We'll go out for a cigarette and I'll say, I've been a little high today, all day long. I hope I don't get called into any meetings because, I've been just a little high.
Yeah.
And we'll laugh and, and she'll say, okay, are you okay? And I'll say, yeah, I just needed to get that out, is what I say.
Yeah.
But it is a part of the whole self-talk, because self-talk, but I had not known about the inner critic, and that's fascinating because nobody beats me up more than I do.
Oh, that's what it's all about. That's
Nobody,
the inner critic.
Nobody criticizes me
What we
harder
say to
than...
ourselves, we would never say to someone else that we cared for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've had supervisors, I've had employers, executive director said to me recently, a couple of years ago, my executive director said to me at one point, she said, Colin, I won't criticize you about this because I know you're going to do it all by yourself. So you will criticize yourself way more than I ever could. And I didn't realize that it was that obvious to other people until I got it fed back to me.
That's why I coach my parents to say the inner voice instead, because we don't often realize how we talk about ourselves so negatively out loud, and people pick that up, and you just to absorb it as to your own way of being, right? And no, it's neat.
Good lesson.
what are your plans going forward from this, but with just your own well-being and where you see yourself going from this point forward?
Well, once I win the lottery, then...
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back on planet Earth, I like to live each day as much in the moment as I can. I hope that I will continue to work, I will continue to feed myself well, to walk home every day, to get some exercise, to be with friends, to volunteer in the community around something. I volunteer for homelessness. So volunteer around something that I care about.
Yep.
I'm excited about my blog. I've written quite a bit already, and I'm getting close to going live.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to paying attention to those subtle things, those little things that happen every day that make you go, oh, interesting. And because I was in the moment,
You noticed it.
I noticed it.
Yeah.
And I think that living day to day just excites me.
Yeah. It's a hard phrase for people to understand, but literally it's just slowing things down every day, noticing things. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's easy. Maybe it's easy at 59 to say that.
Right.
Maybe if I was 29, I might
Yeah.
feel much. Well, I would feel much different, you know,
Yeah.
knowing what I was like at 29. But there's lots of mature 29-year-olds in the world these days. So yes, and you know what, Samantha, I do enjoy the opportunity to go out and tell my story. I do enjoy sharing my lessons learned with other people in the hope that maybe there's a little nugget in that for them. That's how I learned a lot of what I've learned in life, was from other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I'll continue to say at restaurants when they take my order and they say, "Is there anything else you'd like, sir?" And I say, "Yes, I'll have a side order of a world peace to go, please." And they'll laugh and they'll go, "I'm sorry, we don't have that on the menu." I said, "It's on back order, right? Yeah, let's get on that."
Right.
So my inner social activist is still bubbling.
Alive and well.
Yes.
So any just last words of advice or things you'd just like to leave listeners with as we kind of end our conversation today?
I'll go back to what we said earlier about love. And I truly believe that love is the answer.
Yeah.
I believe that love of self is the most important lesson that I have learned in my lifetime. And I hope that everybody has the opportunity to know that, to really feel it in their hearts and in their minds.
Well, it's been very enjoyable talking with you, so I'm glad we were
Thank
able to
you.
make this happen. Yeah.
Likewise.
Hi, Samantha Pekh here again from PsychSolutions. So I wanted to thank you for joining us for this conversation that I had with Colin Simpson, and even a bigger thank you to Colin for being willing and open to sharing his story, his knowledge, his insights. I do think he has a lot to share with people who are either have bipolar or wanting to learn how to support it. And he's presented in a lot of different areas in the local area, in the Edmonton area, and I hope a lot of questions that you had have been answered from what he was able to share with us today. If you know of anybody else who would benefit from watching this video, certainly feel free to share this video with them or direct them directly to the website PsychSolutions.ca, and they can watch the video there, as well as gain access to any of the resources that are available on that website. And the resources that are there are changing kind of over time, so it might change a bit depending when they arrive at the website. But there'll be things there, and if they're wanting more individual support or group support, then they'll be able to find information on that website as well where they can obtain that. And at this point, the group support comes at no cost because we have funding available to provide it as such. So again, thank you for joining us. If you want more information, that website again is PsychSolutions.ca. And again, just thank you very much, Colin, for coming and meeting with me today. And I'm just going to take a drink here.
Oh yeah. Okay, me too. Hear me.
Fingers. So,